Hi, I'm Carrie Penny, and on this episode of Secret Heart Broadcasting, I'm speaking with Susan Wismer, poet, wise woman, world traveler, mother, grandmother. She's turning 74 and has just published her first book of poetry. If you are interested in a conversation about courage and forgiveness and learning to be who you are meant to be in the world, then this episode is for you. Hello and welcome to Secret Heart Broadcasting. I'm Carrie Penny, and on this episode, I am very excited to talk to poet, activist, wise woman Susan Wismer from her home on the edge of Georgian Bay in Ontario. So through the miracle of modern technology, Susan's been able to dial in. We'll be able to hear you and we'll be able to see you. And I am so excited to speak with you. So if I may, Susan, who will be turning 74 this year, has just published her first full volume of poetry, Hag Dances, first book, and a collaboration that came out earlier this year, Hand Shadows, from Wintergreen Press. Anyway, Susan has had this amazing life, or what little I know of your life sounds amazing and rich and full and true. And I guess I just want to start. I mean, my biggest question for you, Susan Wismer, is tell me everything you know about life. You've just had this rich, rich life, and you continue to be strong and vital and creative. And anyway, I'm thrilled you're here. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much. And it's a delight to be here. Everything I know about life. Well, on one hand, there's quite a lot. On the other hand, there's not very much. One of the reasons I'm really happy to be here with Secret Heart Broadcasting is because it is so much about the heart, learning to live. And, that's where courage comes from. So I think in my relatively long life, one of the main things I've learned is courage, is just to have heart and not to let anything turn me away from a heartful approach to life. And of course, I'm not always successful, but that's the through line. That's where I try to go. That's where I try to be.
I love that, courage and heart. And of course, core, the heart, courage, it's all related. We first met a couple of years ago at Wintergreen at a poetry retreat, and we were both studying with the Canadian poet Lorna Crozier. And it had been a dream of mine to, even meet Lorna Crozier. My mother and I met Lorna Crozier at a book signing. She was my mom's favorite poet. And, I felt... we were talking earlier about everyone feels like an imposter. I was feeling a bit like an imposter because I was, you've been writing for a while, and I had known your poetry before I met you, and the place was just rich with these, women who write. And I guess what I wanted to say is thank you for being so kind and generous, because you're small but mighty. You're this fierce presence, right? It could have easily been like, oh, Susan Wismer. And I'm curious to know, were you always kind of that, fierce, strong, mighty person? Because you would have grown up in a different time. Like I imagine I was growing up in like the late 60s, 70s, and I imagine you were kind of late 50s, 60s. So what was that like, and what were you like then, and how on earth did things work for women?
Oh, not very well, actually. I grew up at a time where people would look at my little girl self and say, now, dear, what do you think you're going to do after you finish school and before you get married? Are you going to be a secretary, maybe a teacher for a while? And, or a nurse. And like, first of all, it was very unclear to me as a child that I wanted to be married. The home that I grew up in was not very peaceful. And, so that was a stopper right there. And then also I had no desire to be a nurse, a secretary, or a teacher, although I ended up being a teacher for many years of my life and actually was very happy to do it by the time I got there. But as a kid, it was like I did not want to be one of those people standing up in front of the room. In those days, there were straps and anyway. yeah, so it wasn't a real easy time to be a young woman, a young girl growing up and in the 50s. And I think part of my feistiness comes from that. I was very fortunate in that I had a mother who used to say to me, Susan, you can be anything you want to be. Just go for it. And I would say, oh, well, I think I'd like to be a writer. And she'd say, well, uh, what you need to know is most writers don't really make much money. So maybe you should find something else as well. But there was always that encouragement to figure out what I wanted and go after it. So
And
I'm grateful
encouragement
for
from the
that.
mother.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, did you have a lot of nature in your life growing up, or a place where you could kind of go and, reset your nervous system?
Yeah. I think, because like many kids growing up in the 50s, um, there was a lot of what we call now post-traumatic stress in our house. After the war, people were very wounded, many people, and including in particular my father. And so my refuge was being outdoors. I grew up in a little town, and it was at a time where you would leave home as a kid and you could wander in the summer, you could wander everywhere unless you had to be home for chores. And the thing was, when the streetlights came on, you better be home. So uh, being outdoors and wandering, we lived at the edge of town, wandering in the fields and going to the creek, which was forbidden, going down to the lake, which was forbidden, were wonderful. The other thing that happened for me as a kid is that my family started to go tent camping every summer. And that was the one time when my dad really relaxed and things felt easy. So I grew up just loving being in the woods, loving tenting and loving campfires and singing songs. And, you know, it was such a nice contrast from life at home.
You talked a lot about going to places that were forbidden, and I think, I'm getting a sense of you as this very courageous young woman. What were you afraid of?
Mostly I was mostly I was afraid of my father's wrath. I mean, I didn't really think I was going to drown in the creek. We lived at near the shore of Lake Ontario. I understood that when storms were coming up, it could be quite dangerous. So I didn't go down there then. But there were general edicts, like don't go near the creek, don't go down to the lake without an adult there. And, it's not nearly as much fun with an adult. It just isn't.
Oh, that's so true. Okay, so you had this. I'm getting a sense of your childhood, and we share. I didn't know this. We share this kind of wounded father from the Second World War. I mean, I think honestly, right now, the whole world is sharing the wound of the father. Yeah, yeah. My friend says everyone has daddy issues, but it just feels we're in a time where we're really seeing that, and I didn't realize we
Yeah.
shared that in our childhood. Can you talk a little bit about going to university? It sounds like you definitely had your mom's support to do post-secondary education, that an education would not be lost on a woman. I think in my mom's generation, you didn't invest in the woman because, it was the
She
son
was
that would
going to
take
get
care of
married.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was unusual and fortunate in that both my parents had post secondary education. And in the little town where I spent much of my childhood, my mother was the only person who had gone beyond high school. And so, in some ways, that isolated her a little bit. When I was a teenager, we moved back to Toronto, and she immediately joined the University Women's Book Club and was able to engage in some of the things of the mind that she had not had access to for many years. But there was always a belief that education was really important and a way to live into a much bigger world and to know how to navigate through it. So I grew up with a very strong ethic around education. And the other thing that happened was when one day I came home from high school, which I hated, and wanted to quit. And in those days, there was work. There was work. I could have quit and got a job. And my mother burst into tears and she said, I never really found my people until I went to university. And I understood what she was talking about. And that made obviously a big impression on me. Because here I am, nearly 74, and that probably happened when I was 15. So.
Thanks for listening. If you like the show, please tell your friends.